Ladies, gentlemen, are you ready for some football? No, not the professional stuff. That's still quite a few weeks away. I'm talking about college football. Yes, NCAA Division One football, or Division 1A or A1, whatever they call it nowadays. It's going to be starting on Labor Day, so we're about a month away from the games kicking off here. And recently we had the first top 25 coaches poll released, and I gotta say it's a little perplexing. I know you really can't read this, but to kind of give you sort of a general overview there. I'm sure if you have HD, you might be able to pick this up. But it's the usual suspects. I mean, OSU, TCU, Alabama, Baylor, Oregon, Michigan State, Auburn, FSU, UGA, and USC all rounding out the top 10. And I think right off the bat, there's a couple of teams on there that I think are not going to be championship caliber squads at any point throughout the college football season. But looking at the rest of the 25, I mean, we've got some very, very bamboozling selections here. And I don't know. I think really the thing we're trying to do here, we're trying to avoid going for the obvious thing, which is Ohio State and Alabama. And ultimately, I think at the end of the season, neither of those teams will be playing for the national championship. In fact, I don't think either of those two teams, which are obviously the most popular picks, will even be part of the four-team playoff. I think there's going to be some interesting things happening this season, and that's really sort of the beauty of college football. Every single game of the year is a playoff game. You lose one, you could be out of a national championship contention. So, I'm looking forward to all of the mayhem in and out every week. One game can influence everything. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of give you my final tally for what I think the AP Top 25 will look like heading into the bowl game season. There's 100-plus teams in Division 1. It's impossible to kind of go out there and give you a thorough analysis of each and every team obviously involved in that division. So I'm just kind of doing my best to kind of predict things to be doing the best. And on top of that, I'm going to be taking a look at a couple of teams who are expected to do pretty well this year, who I think are going to do abysmally. Then I'm going to do my bowl game predictions, and of course, not my bowl game prediction, I'm going to be doing that later. But before that, I'm going to be doing my conference championship predictions, and then finally, the national championship picks. Now, before we move along, maybe get a marker first off, but let's talk about the coaches poll real quick. When we talk about the coaches poll, something very, very unusual sort of happens here. Now, I wonder if anybody else kind of picked up on it. And that is the number of teams that are included in the top 25 who actually performed pretty good last year, but really kind of collapsed late in the season. And I think we're seeing an overabundance of teams like Arizona State University, teams like Ole Miss, and even some truly perplexing picks like Arkansas and Missouri, who are in the top 25, who I don't think even, considering what they did last year, is really deserving of that. And, I think it's going to play out. That's the thing about college football, one loss shakes up everything. And there's going to be some surprises, and there's going to be some teams out there that are expected to do very well, who will not perform exceptionally at all. And I think there's a couple of teams who are going to upset everybody and get things very, very interesting heading into January. All right, so without further ado, my top 25 heading into the bowl game season. Number one, I'm going with Auburn. I think Auburn is going to win the SEC. I think they're going to go in there. They're going to lose one game. I don't think any team in Division I football that's worth the hoot is going to go undefeated this year. It's just too tight. There's too much contentious games going on. A lot of great interdivisional games, a lot of great outside the division conference games going on this year. So I think there's going to be a larger than average proportion of teams losing very, very significant games during the regular season. So Auburn, I think they're a one-loss team. They end up eventually winning the SEC. I think they drop one game the entire year. I don't think it's going to be against Alabama. I think they actually win the Iron Bowl. I think with Auburn, it's going to be a trap game. They're going to lose to an LSU, an Ole Miss, maybe even a UGA, a team which ultimately Auburn is better than. But I just think there's just too many games on their schedule, especially too many away games. And they're not going to have the best performance in at least one of them. But they still end up being number one in the AP poll. TCU, Baylor, I think it's going to be pretty much a shootout all year round. You can kind of flip-flop those around. Actually, I think Baylor might actually beat TCU. They'll be the one loss for Texas Christian. But I think Baylor ends up losing a game to Kansas State. So, once again, shake and bake. And we'll see how that plays out later on in the national championship picture. I got Michigan State. I think they're the best team overall in the Big 12. Is it the Big 12 or the Big 10? Big 10. Okay, yeah, they're the best team in the Big 10. Better than Ohio State. I know it's going to sound absolutely crazy, but more on that in just a few. Ultimately, I think they're the winners of the Big 10, and they're going to do some great things. I got Louisville as a 2-loss team winning the ACC. Obviously, Florida State is going to be the Florida State of last year. Georgia Tech and Miami are good, but I think ultimately Louisville will end up beating them in the championship. Boise State, I think they'll be our comeback team of the year. They're going to have only one loss. They're going to do very well, win the conference, but they're going to have probably a trap game loss. So I think they're going to be this year's TCU, this year's Baylor, where they're going to have a pretty strong argument for being included in the national championship discussion, but they won't. 7, Alabama seems a 2-loss team. They lose to Auburn. I think they'll lose another trap game somewhere down the road. Probably to Tennessee. I think that's the big one that they're going to end up losing that one. I think Tennessee's going to be a much, much better team. Probably actually going to win the SEC East this year, so if you haven't put money on them, you might want to think about doing that. Number 8, got Notre Dame, 2-loss team, and do very well, but I think they're going to end up collapsing a little bit late in the season. The Georgia Tech game scares me. USC, Clemson, Stanford, it just stands to reason they're going to drop at least 1 or 2 of those. Ohio State, now, this is going to sound crazy. You're going to look at me like right now and say I'm out of my mind. But folks, hear me out. They're the number 1 ranked team in the nation. On Labor Day, or actually Labor Day weekend, Labor Day Monday, they're going to go into Virginia Tech. And once again, I think Ohio State is going to lose. They're going to get upset. It's going to be a huge, huge deal. Nobody's making that pick now, but you know what? I think it's going to happen. And you're going to go back and you're going to be showing this video to all your friends saying, hey, this one dude on the internet predicted it. So Ohio State, number 1 consensus pick, drops that first game of the season. But they make amends for it. They go on a killing spree. They beat up Michigan. They beat up, a lot of the teams beat up Penn State. But I think they end up dropping the game against Virginia Tech, first game of the season, and I think they end up losing another very, very pivotal game against Michigan State, and that's going to keep them out of the national championship discussion. So there we go. Miami, once again, a really, really good team. I'm trying to figure out, who they'll end up losing to. And actually, hold on, believe it or not, I don't even think Miami's actually ranked in the top 25 from the coaches poll. Okay, well, that's just utterly absurd. But, yeah, they're going to do pretty strong. I think ultimately they'll lose a bid. They'll end up losing a game like Georgia Tech or something, and they'll keep them out of the ACC championship. So they'll do pretty well. Another team you want to put some money on. Kansas State, everybody's talking about Baylor and TCU, but I think Kansas State is also a very, very, very good team. If they were in another division, they would win the Pac-12 if they were in it this year. I think they're that good of a team. But I see them losing to, one of TCU or Baylor. They're going to drop in at least one game to one of those guys. And then another trap game along the road. But they will beat either TCU or Baylor. They'll get that win. Wisconsin, really, really easy schedule out there in the Big 12. They're in the Big 12, right? Or is that the Big 12. Or then Big 10. This confused. They need better names. Well, anyway, they're in the same division as... Who are in the same division with? The same division with Ohio State and Penn State and all those guys. Well, anyway, they have a really easy road. I think they only lose one game in the regular season, but they get trounced by Michigan State later on in a championship game, so they end up being 2-loss. Tennessee, this is really the team to watch in the SEC. They're going to beat Georgia. They're probably going to lose maybe just one game. 1 or 2 games maybe, and then get a date with Auburn and make it very, very, very dangerously close in the SEC championship. Georgia Tech, I see them being a 3-loss team. They're probably going to drop a game or 2, but they'll make it the ACC championship. They end up dropping it to Louisville. Penn State, I think it's going to be a resurgent team. You look at some of their games coming up, I think they could actually maybe even beat Ohio State. They might win a couple. They're going to probably be the second or third best team in the Big Ten overall, or Big 12, Big 11. I don't care. It's confusing. Okay, ran out the top 25 real quick. I've got Utah as a 3-loss team, and the shocking thing is I think that can probably be enough to give them the Pac-12. More on that later. LSU, I think a really underrated team. Obviously, they're in probably the most stacked division in the most stacked conference in all of NCAA football. They could be a threat. They can knock off Auburn, and they could maybe beat Alabama. They can make things very contentious. I see them with 3 losses, but they're going to be a force. They're going to make a difference. I got Virginia Tech. I think they win that huge game against Ohio State, but they really have trouble with ACC later on. Oregon, eventually I see them making it to the Pac-12 championship as a 3-loss, 2-loss team. I'm going with 4 losses here because I'm counting the conference championship loss. So I'm not buying them either. I don't think they're really built to last. West Virginia, another kind of upset team. Once again, it's a very, very tough conference and a very tough division. I think they pull off some upsets. They end up being 3-loss, 4-loss team, always kind of round up. BYU, the team I was really talking about, is an independent. I think they're very solid. I think they go out there and they win a couple of surprising games. They end up being 3-loss, once again rounding up 4-loss team. Texas A&M 22. That guy's not really getting a lot of credit. Kind of the same boat LSU is in. It's all Alabama, all Auburn all the time, but they can win some games. FSU, they went undefeated last year. They're not going to go undefeated this year. They're rebuilding. Too many distractions going down there in Tallahassee. It's them as a 4-loss team at the best. Once again, Missouri, 4-loss team. Arizona State, 4-loss. So that's pretty much how I see that playing out. Now, as for some teams that are pretty highly ranked or being bandied about as potential conference championship teams that I don't think will make it that far, here's basically a short list. I think UGA, way too tough a division. The games against Alabama, they got the games against Tennessee. Who else they have games against? I have double check here. They're ranked 9th. They got Missouri, they got Florida, they got Georgia Tech. I see them dropping 5 of those games. I see them as an iron sulfide team as there ever was one. University of Southern California, also very, very highly ranked. But once again, there's just too many tough games on that schedule. UCLA, Oregon, Arizona, Utah, Washington, Stanford, Arizona State. I see them dropping at least 5 of those. Clemson, same boat. Georgia Tech, Louisville, Miami, Florida State. They got even maybe Boston College. I think now you get an upset on them. See them being a 4-loss team. UCLA. This Pac-12, I just don't see anyone really making much headway in that conference. Once again, too many tough games. Utah, BYU, Zona, Washington State. I think, is that Ohio State or is it Oregon State? Well, anyway, if they play those, they're going to end up losing. So there you go. Ole Miss, kind of another fool's gold team from last year. See them dropping 5 games this year, not really being anywhere near as good as they were the last time around. Oklahoma, really a shell of its former self, 5 losses. Arkansas, just going to get, they're ranked, I believe, 20th. Right now, there's just no way. That conference is too loaded. They're going to drop at least 6 games. And really, Stanford, Arizona, Pac-12, typical, really can't make much progress there. Michigan, new head coach, but same results. I think they're probably going to drop at least 5 games. They're still rebuilding. Florida, 6-loss team. And Mississippi State, once again, another really solid team from last year. I think it's going to have a really precipitous free fall. See them losing about 5 games this year. So, with that said, let's move along to my hypothetical conference championship games. ACC, I got Louisville and Georgia Tech. Should be a pretty interesting matchup. Very good offenses. They play very similarly. But when you have 2 teams that play very similarly, I think you pretty much have to end up going with the team who plays that style the most efficiently and the most predictably. So I think Louisville ends up winning a very close game against Georgia Tech, 28-21. But we will see how that bodes for their future in the conference championship games. Now, the Big 12, not Big 10. I messed this up. These should be flip-flopped. I apologize. It's not confusing at all. The fact that they don't have a conference championship, I believe, is what cost TCU and Baylor big last year. I think TCU and Baylor will ultimately do very, very well for themselves in the postseason. I don't know. I think Baylor gets the upset over TCU, and that gives them the de facto crown. But I think this is the last year they're doing the non-championship format. I think the guys have got to do that. It's just going to hurt them in the long run. If they want representation, the 4-team playoff, they got to expand. Big Ten championship, Michigan State against Wisconsin. Once again, I think Michigan State's a much better team. Wisconsin, they're going to play very, very well in their conference. Up until this point, I think Michigan State just kind of goes in there and rolls 45-21. Not much of a contest. SEC, I've got Auburn winning the West. I've got Tennessee winning the East. I think this is going to be a dangerously close game. Tennessee's going to make it close, but I think Auburn comes in and clutch with a last-second field goal, 34-31, and that wins them the game. And very prominent placement in the eventual championship playoffs. And the Pac-12, really disappointing. I think you have a 3-loss Utah team taking on a 3-loss Oregon team. And I think Utah gets the upset. I think they end up going in here and they end up winning it 40-28. So that game is not really going to have much of implications on anything. So there we go. It's my conference championship picks. Louisville winning ACC, Baylor win the Big Ten. Or Big 12, Michigan State win the Big 10, Auburn SEC, and Utah win the Pac-12, but really kind of irrelevant. So, with that said, let's bring it over to bowl games, the big ones. For the Rose Bowl, I'm going to have Utah against Ohio State, and I think in this one, Utah, I don't know, Ohio State doesn't have much to play for. Utah's trying to make a name for themselves. I think they win it 38-21. And that gets them in the AP top 10 for the end of the year. Sugar Bowl, Louisville, 1-loss team or 2-loss team taking on Boise State. Now, Boise State is going to be a team that's very upset. They're going to have that one loss. They're going to feel like they belong in the national championship playoff picture, and maybe they do. Same thing with Louisville. I think this is going to be like the 5th seed overall and the 6th seed, so they just miss the playoffs. They have a lot to play for. I think it's going to be a very, very, very close game. But ultimately, I think Louisville shows they're the better squad. They win 21-19. And probably the best overall matchup we're going to see in the bowl season this year. Peach Bowl, I'm going to have Alabama against Miami. I think they'll both be 2-loss. Now, you could probably make a better matchup competitively, I believe, with some of the other teams that are left in the brackets. But SEC team, ACC team, it's in Atlanta. Of course, they're going to end up doing this. So it should be a pretty interesting matchup. It's going to be a lot closer to people to expect. But ultimately, I'm going to give this one in a very, very high-scoring game. I'm giving Bama 42 and Miami 35, but should be entertaining. Nice shootout. Fiesta Bowl, we got Notre Dame taking on Kansas State. Very, very tough matchup. I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair. But I think ultimately Notre Dame, they're still rebuilding. They're a very, very good team. But they need to work on that defense. I think it's going to end up costing them in this one. I think they drop it 14-20, Kansas State. So, playoff games. Cotton Bowl, Orange Bowl. Over in Cotton, we've got TCU, Baylor, round 2. In the regular season, I think Baylor gets a very, very big upset. Well, not really a big upset. I mean, they're going to win like 3 points, and they're not going to be, favored that much. But this time around, I think TCU gets their revenge. They're going to win this one. Another high-scoring affair. I think they end up winning it 48-44. So that punches their ticket to the national championship. And over in the Orange Bowl, this is going to be another very, very close matchup. You got Auburn against Michigan State. I think it's going to come down to a field goal. Very solid team, but I think Auburn needs to run the ball a little bit better, but it's going to be close. 24-21 Auburn. So that brings us to our final here. We're going to have TCU and Auburn. Let me write that down real quick. Auburn, TCU, National Championship. Now these teams play very, very similarly. Very fast, very offense-oriented, run-heavy, very, very good defense. Now, like I said earlier, college football is different than pro football. When you have two evenly matched up teams with similar styles of play, you just go with the one whose output is more efficient, more reliable, and frankly, more predictable. And in this scenario, I'm going to have to give it to Auburn. I think Auburn, they have the better defense. The special teams units come and save them many, many times. And I think throughout the season, they're barely going to get past Michigan State, barely get past Tennessee in the SEC championship. But once again, I think they just showed that pluck. They showed that resiliency. And I think ultimately they power their way through in a relatively and surprisingly low-scoring affair against against TCU, my bad. I think they end up winning the national championship 21-19. So expect a lot of field goals. A surprisingly defense-oriented affair. You think it's going to be a shootout, but it's not. And ultimately, special teams makes all the difference. So there you go. My presumptive 2015-2016 national champions, the Auburn Tigers.